Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, let's learn about Kubernetes cluster upgrades. A lot of our subscribers have requested for this video, but somehow I missed it in our free Kubernetes course. This morning, when I was doing one of my Kubernetes cluster upgrades, I realized I should definitely do it. So in this video, you will learn how to upgrade an enterprise grade production level Kubernetes cluster with zero downtime. Now, why is this important? Let me tell you, as a DevOps and cloud engineer, this is one of the most common tasks that you would perform. Once in every 3 months, Kubernetes comes up with a new version. And Kubernetes only supports the latest three versions. Now that 1.32 is out, Kubernetes only supports 1.32, 3.1, and 1.30. Sometimes your cloud provider might also support older versions of Kubernetes, but in general, the latest three versions are considered in the support matrix. So once in every 3 months, it is responsibility of DevOps engineers, cloud engineers to make sure their Kubernetes stack is up to date. And in every organization, you will have different Kubernetes clusters. That means you might have Kubernetes clusters at your unit environment. You might have Kubernetes clusters at your staging environment, pre-production, production. So there will be multiple Kubernetes clusters that a DevOps or cloud engineer usually takes care of. And you do it very frequently. That's why it is something every DevOps and cloud aspirant should know. Again, in this video, we will not directly jump into the cluster upgrade. We will cover the prerequisites. If you are giving DevOps and cloud interviews, or if you're in the process, you will realize that a lot of interviewers are actually interested in understanding what are the prerequisites before you start your Kubernetes cluster upgrade and what is the process of upgrading the Kubernetes cluster. We will use enterprise grade Kubernetes cluster. So in this video, we will use AWS EKS. Don't worry if you're on Azure and using AKS or you're using GKE or any other managed Kubernetes cluster service, just like EKS, the process is more or less the same. So by watching this video, you can also get understanding of how Kubernetes cluster upgrades should be done with other cloud providers. Okay, so let's get started and try to understand what are the prerequisites. So the prerequisites for Kubernetes cluster upgrade, the very first thing that you have to do, let's say you are in a production critical environment and you don't want to take any kind of risk, although we are doing a zero downtime Kubernetes cluster upgrade, but just to be on the safer side, it is good practice to cordon your nodes. That means it is a good practice to make your nodes unschedulable during the process of Kubernetes cluster upgrade. So the cluster upgrade usually takes for 1 to 2 hours. You can inform your team that there will not be any impact on the existing services. Customers will not see any impact. But for the next 1 to 2 hours, we are planning to stop any new deployments. Now, if you feel like, Abhishek, I don't want to do this because we are going to do a zero downtime deployment and I don't want any downtime for my developers as well, It's totally fine. But make sure you have done the Kubernetes upgrades in the past. Now, next step. The next step that you need to do is make sure you go through the release notes. Let's say I'm upgrading from 1.30 to 1.31. It is very, very important that you understand the change log, or what are the changes that went in from 1.30 to 1.31 of the Kubernetes. Maybe there might be API upgrades, there might be API deprecations, there can be change in how a particular feature works. So you should definitely go through the release notes and make sure you understand everything in the release notes. Let me give an example. In one of the older versions of Kubernetes, the APIs, the API group that was used for ingress used to be extensions beta 1, and it was changed to, now there is a new network group, right, where we will use the networking API group for ingress. Let's say you did not read this version upgrade and all of your ingress resources are still using the old API version. Once you upgrade to 1.31, just for example, once you upgrade to earlier Kubernetes version, all your ingress resources will not work. So you can face these kind of impacts. It can be with respect to pod security, it can be with respect to ingress service, any resource on Kubernetes. So important that you go through the change log. And you also need to understand that Kubernetes cluster upgrades are irreversible. That means you cannot downgrade a Kubernetes cluster. I'm talking about EKS. If you have upgraded from 1.30 to 1.31, and if you have realized something is not working with 1.31, you cannot downgrade your Kubernetes cluster to 1.30. You need to do a fresh installation, which is a very big impact for the organization. So that's why what is recommended as a prerequisite before you upgrade your production grade Kubernetes cluster, always test it in your lower environments first. That means start with cluster upgrade of your low level environment, then the staging environment, then the pre-production environment. Give it maybe a 1 week time. And if everything goes well, only then go to the production Kubernetes cluster upgrade. If you are not doing this, you are putting yourself in a huge risk. And even sometimes you can give the grace period as 2 weeks as well, because you want to upgrade your production cluster. Make sure everything works seamlessly in your lower environments. Only then go to the production cluster upgrade. After this, there are some prerequisites on the technical side. One, your control plane of Kubernetes, as well as the nodes, should be on the same version. What does that mean? Let's say you're using EKS and the control plane of EKS is on 1.30. The nodes should also be on 1.30 if you want to upgrade your Kubernetes cluster to 1.31. If your control plane is on 1.30 and if your nodes are on 1.29, before going to 1.31, the first thing that you have to do is upgrade your nodes to 1.30. Only then you can upgrade your Kubernetes cluster. Otherwise, there will be impact. Also, if you're using things like cluster autoscaler, so there is a component of Kubernetes called Kubernetes cluster autoscaler. If you are using this, it's a special requirement. If you are using Kubernetes cluster autoscaler, you need to make sure that the cluster autoscaler that you're using matches with the version of the control plane. Again, if it does not match the version of the control plane or the compatibility matrix of control plane, you will run into issues. And these issues, like sometimes you will take days to solve. So better check mark all the prerequisites before you go to the process of upgrading EKS, AKS, or GKE cluster. Then there is another prerequisite that at least 5 available IP addresses, where you need to have at least 5 available IP addresses within the subnet that you have provided during your Kubernetes cluster creation. We are going to see the steps, right? We are also going to do this practically, where I'm going to upgrade my EKS cluster from 1.30 to 1.31. If you don't have a EKS cluster, don't worry. I'm going to put the steps in the description. I have already put that in a GitHub gist file, how you can create EKS cluster for this tutorial. So you can create the EKS cluster, and after creating, you can also upgrade your Kubernetes cluster. Perfect. So you need 5 available IP addresses. And once you're done with this, the final check that you have to do is that your kubelet, which is a component of your Kubernetes nodes or the data plane, it should also be in sync. Just like how I mentioned, the nodes have to be on the same version of control plane. Similarly, kubelet should also match the version of your control plane. Now, if you have these things in place, so these are the major prerequisites. Sometimes, according to your organization, according to your Kubernetes cluster, according to the availability zones, regions, your prerequisites might change, but these are the prerequisites that everyone has to follow. Now, once you are done with the prerequisites, what is the actual process of upgrading EKS cluster? Now, whenever we say EKS, we say managed Kubernetes cluster. Does that mean upgrades are taken place automatically? No. So a managed Kubernetes cluster means managed control plane. Again, people get confused when they see managed control plane. They assume that upgrades are taken place automatically. No, you still need to either go to the AWS user interface, or you need to use EKSCTL like we are going to do in this video, or you need to use the AWS CLI. Just you need to fire one command where EKS will take care of upgrading the control plane. Now, then why do we say managed control plane? We call it managed control plane because when you are creating a EKS cluster, AWS will take care of high availability of your control plane. And it will also take care of, keeping your uh, control plane in different availability zones, so that even during the time of some issues, there is a disaster recovery. So it takes care of high availability, it takes care of disaster recovery, it takes care of security, and even it takes care of scaling up your API server. Let's say your Kubernetes cluster receives huge number of requests. It will also take care of the API server scaling to handle the requests. That's why we call it as managed Kubernetes cluster, where it manages the control plane, but upgrades are something like if you want to go from 1.30 to 1.31, you still have to go to the AWS UI or use EKSCTL or CLI to upgrade control plane. This is only step one of the process, which is upgrading the control plane. The second step is to upgrade the node group. If you're not using a node group and if you're using the nodes, then you should upgrade the nodes. People use different things, right? Some people might use a managed node group, some people might use nodes, some people might use Fargate or hybrid environment. Whatever it is, just like how you upgrade your control plane, you should also upgrade your nodes or the data plane. And third step is to upgrade the add-ons. So you might have add-ons like kubeproxy or VPC CNI, any kind of add-ons that you have, you also need to upgrade it. So the typical process of EKS cluster upgrade takes place in three phases or three primary steps, where first you start with control plane upgrade, then you go with the node group or data plane upgrade, then you go with the add-ons upgrade. Typically, this takes 30 minutes. This takes usually a lot of time. When you have, let's say you have more number of nodes, it will take a lot of time. In my case, when I did a cluster upgrade this morning, it almost took like 2 hours. But if you go with a basic Kubernetes cluster, this might take some 30 minutes to 1 hour. And then add-ons upgrade, depending upon how many number of add-ons you have. So this is the process of upgrading Kubernetes cluster. So where you would take more time or where you have to be very careful is step number 2. Why? When you're talking about control plane, it's just firing a command. Rest is already taken care by your EKS. You don't manage the nodes of control plane, but the nodes of your data plane, right? It is something that you take care. What do I mean by that? Some people might use managed node groups with launch templates of AWS. It's not that confusing. Just try to focus for a couple of minutes and you will understand. So one is people might use a managed node groups where they just create node groups, manage node groups on AWS and ask AWS to manage those, like scaling of the nodes, desired node count, something like that. Even in our case, if you see here, I am creating a node group. I have already created the cluster, but I use this command where I have provided that, okay, this is the minimum node count, this is the maximum node count, and I have also provided the desired node count. So in this case, a launch template got created. Just like that, some people might also manage everything by their own, manage by your own, where people might either create a custom launch template, right? They might prepare their own launch template, or people might also just install the nodes instead of node groups. Without node group, they directly create some EC2 nodes and try to attach that. Or some people might also go with the hybrid approach. So depending upon what approach you are taking, let's say you are using node groups. So it becomes simple when you're using node groups. All that you need to do is you need to select an option in AWS, which is progressive, or it's called as rollout deployment, where what EKS does, or any managed Kubernetes service in this case does, they go to the node group. As part of node group, let's say you have 3 nodes. First, it upgrades node 1, then it upgrades node 2, and then it upgrades node 3. So it takes node by node. Everything takes place node by node. So this process is called as rollout. There is another option which is called forceful. I'll talk about it later. But by using the rollout approach with the node group, you roll out the upgrade for individual nodes. So it will become easy when you have 100 nodes, when you have 200 nodes, the rollout approach is better. Instead of this, let's say you are managing your node groups, or you are coming up with the custom nodes where you have created different EC2 instances and attach them to your Kubernetes cluster. Now this becomes little tricky because you need to individually cordon a node, and you need to unschedule that node, and you need to upgrade that node. Assume you have 100 nodes. So it will take a lot of time for you to go through this process. Some people, when they have less number of nodes, they simply create a new node group, or they create 2 additional nodes, and they try to attach those nodes and delete the previous version of nodes. That becomes easy when you have less number of nodes, but when you have more number of nodes, the only approach is to go rollout way, step by step. Finally, the hybrid approach, which is combination of both of them. So this is the process that we follow. First, upgrade control plane, then upgrade the data plane, then upgrade of the plugins. Plugin upgrades are usually not that difficult. You can just do it by a click of button, and most of the times they go smooth. During upgrade, a lot of people have one question, that is, Abhishek, I have Helm installed, I have Argo CD installed, I have Flux installed, I have Prometheus installed. Do I need to stop all of them during my upgrade? Let me tell you, whether it is Helm, whether it is Argo CD, whether it is Prometheus, end of the day, they are Kubernetes controllers. So to make sure they work fine after your upgrade, test that properly, thoroughly in your lower environments. If interviewers are asking this question, to understand, have you performed upgrades in real time or not? The answer to it is, make sure everything works on the lower environments. If it works on the higher environment, that is your production. Perfect. So now let's head to the point of upgrade. So we already have a Kubernetes cluster. If I just refresh, so I created a Kubernetes cluster with name Observability. The name Observability because I just used the same steps that we followed in our observability free course. So instead of writing everything again, I'm just using the same commands. You will also find this gist file in the description, where I have created the control plane using the ekctl command without any node group. I pass this flag, so it only creates the control plane in a high available mode, US East 1, US East 1B. Then I have associated IAM OIDC provider, which is a very common thing. Without this, your pods of Kubernetes cannot communicate with other resources of AWS. This OIDC provider usually takes care of associating your IAM with service accounts of Kubernetes. Service account of Kubernetes is binded with IAM so that your Kubernetes pod using the service account can access other services of AWS platform. And then I have created the node group where I have provided the basic details like in which region the node group has to be, what is the volume size of the node group, what is the minimum capacity, what is the maximum capacity, and the networking related things. Cool. So another important step is to understand your Kubernetes cluster well. The reason why I was trying to explain all of it is before trying to perform the upgrade, you should be in a position that you are already a master of your Kubernetes cluster. You exactly know what are the different controllers that are installed in that particular Kubernetes cluster. You need to know what are the different add-ons you have. You need to know the networking of that Kubernetes cluster. Otherwise, even if you go through the release notes, you won't understand the impact of the change log on your Kubernetes cluster, right? So now that we are done with the understanding part, let's try to see how execution usually goes through. Once you go to the EKS dashboard, you will see something here called upgrade insights. This is something that you should not ignore. So here the insight says one of my add-ons is out of the compatibility matrix. So I need to upgrade my add-on. That's totally fine. I'm not worried about my add-on at this point of time, right? I will upgrade my Kubernetes cluster, then I'll take care of the add-on. Okay. So what is the version of Kubernetes that we are using? 1.30. Let's head to the terminal and we need to fire this command eksctl upgrade cluster hyphen hyphen the name of the cluster, the region in which the cluster is, and to the version where you want to upgrade. Also, please approve, that is, you need to add hyphen hyphen approve. Now, as soon as you do this, EKS will take care of upgrading your control plane. Will upgrade cluster observability control plane from current version 1.30 to 1.31. You might find it very simple because we are actually not taking care of any of these prerequisites. I have explained all of these prerequisites. In real time, you should go through each of this checkbox, go through the release notes, read the release notes, verify that everything is working in the lower environments. So even to reach this point of firing this command, you will take at least 1 to 2 days. So there is a lot of prep work that you have to do before firing this command. Because this is just a sandbox cluster and does not really have anything, I just fired the command. Cool. Now this will take up to 25 minutes. And after that, we will have our control plane upgraded. So let me pause this video and come back. Okay. So now we can see here in the logs that, okay, cluster observability control plane is upgraded to 1.31, and it says that all the node groups have up-to-date cloud formation template. Let's go to the AWS dashboard and let's try to refresh. We should see the version upgrade to 1.31. We are not done yet. Okay, we are only done with upgrading the control plane. Now, if you click on compute, so here you can clearly see compute has this number one as well as add-ons has this number one. That means you need to take action on compute and you should also take action on add-ons. If you go to compute, what does it say? So it says that the version currently we are using is 1.30, and there is a option here already available for update now. Now let's try to understand what is this AMI release version. When I have created this Kubernetes cluster, I have used AMI, that is a image that is provided by Amazon that is compatible with 1.30 of Kubernetes. Some people might also use custom AMI for their nodes. If they are using custom AMI, they need to upgrade the AMI to the new version by themselves. In this case, we are using AMI that is provided by Amazon. So we can click on the update now button and then it will start using the 1.31 version of Kubernetes. Now, what will this AMI have? In general, if you want to understand, all the managed components like kubelet or any other things, the Kubernetes components that are running on your data plane are available in this AMI. So it is essential for you to upgrade it. You also can see an option here, add node group. This is another approach that people take where they add new node group with two EC2 instances or more number of EC2 instances. The new node group is created with the new version, right? So here I can create a new node group with a launch template or without a launch template. And I can directly create this with 1.31. And once the node group is ready and it is connected to the Kubernetes cluster, I can simply uninstall this node group. Now this works fine when you have less number of instances. But what if you have 10 instances? What if you have 20 instances? Their costing also comes to the matter. So that's why we will click on update now. And this is what I was talking about. Here you have an option for rolling update. What does this mean? This means your Kubernetes cluster will be upgraded with zero downtime. Even in your interviews, if people are asking about zero downtime, how you can achieve zero downtime, you will use a strategy called rolling update. You can do this from EKCTL, you can do this through AWS CLI, but for better understanding, I'm showing you through the AWS user interface. You can change the launch template, but again, that's a different thing. Let's not get into it. Click on the update button. Now, what are the considerations that we have seen here? It is important to note, especially when it comes to the data plane, the upgrade involves in launch templates as well as AMI. If you are using your own launch templates, it is your responsibility to upgrade the launch templates. If you are using custom AMI, it is your responsibility to build that custom AMI. If you are using things provided by AWS, you can simply use the update option. Even this is something that you can convey during the interview process. At any point of time, if you are confused, AWS provides a wonderful documentation. I will also put this link in the description. Just as a revision or just as a summary of this video, you can quickly go through this documentation. I have covered everything, but still, if you want, you can just revise by going through the doc. Okay, now this will again take a good amount of time. Like I mentioned, when you are trying to upgrade your data plane or the nodes, it takes some amount of time. Once this is done, what we will do is we will go to the add-ons, and within the add-ons, you will see here for AWS VPC CNI, you can see the upgrade version. You can simply provide the version, just keep it latest or compatible with your version that you are trying to upgrade, and click on the upgrade button, right? So your plugins or the add-ons will also be updated. Abhishek, when should I go for the forceful update instead of rolling updates? If you're using pod disruption budgets, that is where the forceful updates comes into picture. Otherwise, you can pretty much use the rolling update option. So yeah, these are the steps for upgrading your Kubernetes cluster. We don't have to wait for next 40 minutes or next 50 minutes. This will be done successfully. I have done it previously as well. So just follow the steps. If you want to try it at your end, you can follow the same steps. Once the update is done, go to the add-ons and click on update version buttons. After that, how will you verify if your upgrade is working fine? How to test the upgrade? It's super simple. To test the upgrade, just write a simple script, or your QA engineering team might already have end-to-end tests or the regression tests. Some people also call functional tests. So just try to execute the functional tests on the upgraded version to make sure everything is working seamlessly. You don't have to look at individual components like if Argo CD is working fine or not, uh, Helm is working as expected or not. You don't want to think all of that. Just create a functional test suite or end-to-end test suite to make sure everything is working fine. To complete, to just give you a summary of this video, because we discussed a lot of things, so I just want to conclude the video with the summary. Whenever we are talking about Kubernetes cluster upgrades, there are prerequisites that you have to follow. Now, what are the important prerequisites? The important prerequisites that you have to go through is the very first thing, cordon, or just try to unschedule your nodes. This is not mandatory. This is only for people who want to be on the safer side. Otherwise, the next steps that I'm going to mention are mandatory. One is make sure your control plane and the nodes are with the same Kubernetes version. Make sure you go through the release notes and understand every point in the release notes. Then start with your lower environments. Verify everything works on your lower environments. Keep a buffer time of 1 to 2 weeks. Once that is done, make sure your kubelet as well as cluster autoscaler are also with the compatible version of your control plane. Finally, you need to have 5 available IP addresses in the subnet that you have provided while creation of your Kubernetes cluster. Whether you're using Terraform, whether you're using EKSCTL, AWS CLI, the prerequisites are same and the steps are also exactly same for your upgrade. In fact, if you use Terraform, it will become even more easy because you just need to update the variables. That's it. Just update the variables and fire Terraform apply. Your cluster upgrade will be done. We'll deal that in a different video, but these are some of the prerequisites. And once the prerequisites are done, the process of upgrading starts. Important point of prerequisites is this one, where making sure everything works on your lower environments. If this is done 100% right, your upgrade can also be 100% smooth. If not 100%, at least you can be 99% confident on your production cluster upgrade. Now, the process of upgrade involves 3 steps. First is upgrading your control plane. Second thing is upgrading your node groups, either the self-managed node groups or the node groups that you have created with custom launch templates or the nodes with custom AMIs. Anything, you need to upgrade that to the version that you upgraded to control plane. Finally, upgrade the add-ons. By doing all of it, your Kubernetes cluster upgrade will be smooth. Recently, EKS has launched something called EKS Auto. If you are thinking what it will do additionally, so it will also ease the process of your node upgrades. But I would highly recommend understanding this process before you go to AWS EKS Auto. Still, a lot of companies might follow this approach, and you might be asked this question during your interviews. Thank you so much for watching today's video. See you all in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.